So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Chocolate Life Live for Tuesday, February the 1st. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And today we're starting a brand new series here on the Chocolate Life Live. Tuesdays, we're going to be looking at people, personalities, makers, farmers, people who have an impact, growers, writers, bloggers, whose stories are ones that I want to talk about, as opposed to Fridays, which is when we're going to continue our discussion on topics. So I'm going to play the intro. On the other side of the intro, I'm going to be introducing our guests for today. So welcome, everybody, to the Chocolate Life Live. I'd like to say special thanks to my guests, Derek Peterson of Kontur Chocolate and John Malik, who is a Chocolate Life contributor. And today's topic is going to be innovation and entrepreneurship. And before we get started and we let Derek and John talk about themselves, what has happened is that there's a really interesting video that has been produced. And what I want to do is I want to play that video now.
My name is Derek Peterson. I am a tech entrepreneur that now does chocolate. So my background is in engineering, and then I started and built a software company. But the entire time I was doing that, like, I'm a geek, I'm a maker, I'm an inventor. I love making things. And so how it originally got started was I was visiting my sister in New York City. We were walking down the street in Queens, and we stumbled upon this little shop that had this architect, and he was making custom shaped bars using like 3D printing and like silicone molds and various things. And I was like, oh, that's like really cool. I bet you I could do that. And so I came home and I 3D printed a little mold, poured silicone in it, took out the silicone, and then I had like a food safe thing, and I melted some Hershey's chocolate in a pan and I poured it in there. And then I let it harden and I pulled it out and it looked great, at least for about 2 days, until I realized it wasn't tempered, and then looked terrible. But I was like, this is cool. I made a chocolate bar. So that was kind of the start. The fun part for me is really in molding it in different shapes. And so I will start usually talking with a company or someone who wants some sort of custom shape or designed bar. And so I'll sit down, I'll design that in CAD on the computer. And from that point, I'll send the file over to the 3D printer or the laser cutter or a mix of both. And I will create what will eventually be the kind of tool that creates the molds for the chocolate bars. And then I'll put those on the thermoformer, and I will form sheets of plastic over those molds to create like a negative cavity. And that negative cavity is what the chocolate will get poured in. And then once the chocolate's poured in the cavity, you let it cool. If you do everything right and everything's perfect, it pops out all nice. So that's the molding process. And so when you take the chocolate process and the molding process and you put those two together, you get like a very long 38-step process or whatever that you go through to get the finished bar. When I got into chocolate, I was like, okay, how do I take this and do something with it that is gonna have a big community impact? And so for me, that was trying to engineer a process that I can do a couple of things with. I can hire people, I can use the profits to maybe fund different community projects. And so really the whole goal of this is to say, how do we engineer this process? How do we build this company? Not to make the most amount of money, which is really not the goal. It's how do we make the biggest difference in the community? And a good example of that is we package and box all of our chocolate. We have a local printer print 11 by 17 sheets of paper, and we designed and ordered a die cutter, so there's a job for someone to sit there and run the boxes through the die cutter back and forth, so that we end up with these sleeves or boxes that we can put the chocolate into. So we create some jobs, we can do things a little bit more custom, we have a little bit more control over the process. And so it's things like that that we're making decisions on and doing that we're hoping that will benefit the community as we grow. So we're just ramping up, but if you are interested in custom chocolate bar with your company logo or for a big event, go to ConturChocolate.com. Can't buy it online, but you can send me an email and I'd be more than happy to do a custom order. So we'd love to make you some chocolates and do some good in the community.
So Derek, if I can, you describe this, I think it's a metaphoric 38 or 39 step process of going from cocoa beans into a finished product. But it seems like there are at least 39 steps and years of work of getting to the point where you get to these 39 steps. So, can you give us a little more information about, how you think your background and specifically what aspects of your background sort of lead you in or led you into what it is that you're doing? Right, today, because I think that there's I look at my career, for example, when I'm a trained as a fine artist, went to study photography at Rhode Island School of Design, and then spent 20 years in high technology managing software development products or projects, and then I realized that there were no professional chocolate critics, and bang, that was the moment of madness, right? Or the entrepreneurial epiphany, if you were. Depends on who you're talking to, which leads me to where I am sitting talking to you today. So can you give us the sort of, can you connect the dots for us if you want?
Yeah, well, I'll do my best to try. The dots are all over the place, and so it might be a little hard to connect them. But I think part of how I ended up with this process, ended up here, was just the diversity of my background. And so growing up, I was a geek that would take apart VCRs. I remember one day I took apart our family VCR because I didn't think we were going to use it anymore, and I couldn't put it back together. My dad got really frustrated at me. So that was me from a young age. And then I ended up going to school for mechanical engineering, got out, did that for just a very short period of time, moved into co-founding and building a software company, which we later sold. So kind of got into technology. I ran most of the business side of that business. And so understanding, value proposition for what you're producing, who you're targeting as a market, like all those, businessy terms. I learned all those and got baptized by fire there. And so, when I kind of left that world and I sold that company, I started doing a lot of mentoring and really got into just mentoring on the business side. And then I just started making chocolate as a hobby. So my wife and I went for our 10th anniversary to St. Lucia, and we went to this little chocolate making course. And I thought you need all this big equipment. And the guy was like, no, just go on Amazon, $300, buy a grinder and start doing it. And I did. And that started what is now, I guess, almost a 3-year journey through not only figuring out how to make chocolate itself, but really doing that from the interest in just how do I, create a different, unique product that not a lot of people have created or no one has created, which really brought in my engineering background. So I really just kind of looked at, what is everything that I know and how do I bring it in to bolster what I'm currently doing now in chocolate. And that's kind of just, I guess maybe naturally happened.
I think the thing which is most interesting for me about all of this, if I can, is that, there's a combination of electrical and mechanical engineering and what it is that you're doing. But there's also, at some point you have to be familiar with, in your particular case, 3D modeling and bunches of different kinds of technologies. And I think that one of the things that impressed me most is a willingness to borrow from other people, right? But then to go and attack, okay, what is one of the biggest challenges that I have in making finished product and deliver it to people, especially if what it is that I need to do is I only need to deliver 100 copies of something or 100 units of something, which is special. How do I go about making that happen in a cost-efficient way? And, I look at what it is that you're doing with getting the die line made from this company called AccuCut, and then being able to, on very, very short run, be able to produce custom packaging. I think that, what it requires is somebody who doesn't come from the chocolate making world to begin with, somebody who doesn't come from these things and who is not limited by sort of the acceptance of the status quo, if we want, for one reason or another, to go, oh yes, I can go in and do this. And John, you have a long background as a chef in lots of different capacities. And then you went down to Belize last year on a sabbatical, I suppose is a good way to talk about it. When you went down to Belize, did you go down to study chocolate? Is that what you thought you would be doing? Or is it just something you discovered when you were there?
No, it was something when we started talking about it, it was something that we read about. We knew that there were some handful of chocolate makers. And so we found Juan Cho's shop prior to leaving. So we knew we knew we would learn about cacao and chocolate. But the whole idea of spending a month with Juan, that was something I had to negotiate while I was there.
And the two of you are neighbors, I understand, in South Carolina, right?
We're not exactly neighbors. We're not like, it's not like he comes over to the house and borrows sugar or anything like that.
Same city.
Yeah, we're a good 25-minute drive apart.
From a New York context, yeah, that's, it's getting in the subway and all that kind of stuff. I think of, being in Los Angeles and spending an hour right with my neighbors on the other side of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So, in the collaboration that led to the article. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here again. And for people who are interested, the video that I showed at the front of this, if you don't have an opportunity to watch this live or you're looking this after the fact, either at YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, you're going to be able to go and look at these resources, not just in the video, but if you go to right now, TheChocolateLife.com, this is what the homepage looks like. But if you scroll down, or what you do is you search for the word Kontur. So here's how you might use that. You can click on Kontur chocolate. And what that will do is that it will take you to a story that John wrote about Derek's business. And this is what piqued my curiosity. But I think most importantly, for me, is that these resources are available after the fact, so that you can go and you can take your time. You don't have to worry about reading on the screen, but you have an opportunity to spend some time with these stories. And that includes also having an opportunity to visit Derek's website. And then I maintain a page on the Chocolate Life for every one of my team members, the contributors, and you can go and have a chance to look at all the articles that John has written. I want to share that, everybody. These are available to members and non-members alike. These resources are ones that are freely shared as as part of the Chocolate Life community, and I wanted to make sure that people had an opportunity to know about that. But John, when you first learned about what it was that Derek is doing, I mean, you come at food from your own perspective of innovation. How do I bring my background as a chef, what it is that I know, to the kind of recipes that I'm putting together? But when you looked at what Derek was doing, from your background, what was it that struck you as most interesting?
That he had taken an engineer's approach and he was doing something different. It wasn't about, so he doesn't retail. He's not selling his chocolate down the street or whatever. And everybody else I've met in chocolate, they've been transfixed by, let's say, the terroir of beans from a certain part of the world. And they like these beans for this reason. And I like the chocolate that I'm making from the beans from this particular region of the world. But Derek is like, hey, that's cool, but look at these shapes I'm making. Look at the look at the little thing that I've designed to cut my packaging and to and I think it's okay to say that he's doing this in a small area, right? A small space. Mm-hmm. But inside that small space, he's doing every step other than the fermentation of the bean, right? He's doing everything, right? And so at the end of the day, he's got, 200 chocolate bars that are a custom design shape. The bar is a custom design shape. The packaging is custom designed, and he's reaching out to realtors and companies and stuff that have something to celebrate. And he's like, hey, why not celebrate with a chocolate bar made in your logo, made in your box, and and he can knock it out in 3 or 4 days. And
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's the process of making the chocolate, and then there's the process of getting the chocolate into something.
Right.
Derek, I look at what you're doing, and again, there are lots of processes. There is I have to learn how to make decent tasting chocolate. That's an experience of its own. But I from my background, I know that, not everybody has a real understanding of how to take a 2-dimensional design and convert it into a 3-dimensional version. And not only that, does it have to be 3-dimensional, but I need to understand how chocolate behaves in a 3-dimensional surface, right? In its 3-dimensional shape, and there are how much chocolate is actually in this thing, right, when I'm doing it. And so I need to be able to take my 2D design and think about it in terms of 3 dimensions, in terms of chocolate. Then I have to decide which of any number of technologies that are available to me I might use to reproduce that, depending upon the effect that I'm looking for. So am I using 3D printing? Am I using laser cutting? Are there, any other kinds of technologies that I might use?
Yeah.
Each one of which has its own insane learning curve on its own. And from there, I need to be able to generate a master, which I then need to put into a thermoform machine and then I look at, you've developed certain pegs and systems and all this other kind of stuff. So what of that came easily to you? What represented the most difficult? What took you longest to learn to do well?
Came easily.
Not on the chocolate making side.
Yeah, all of it took a long time, and none of it came easy. Is the simple answer. So I really was only an engineer for like 2 years, and then I became a tinkerer and just someone who's always very curious. So I learn a lot of things because I'm like a lifelong learner. That's what my wife calls me, I guess, and because I just love learning about everything. So it just took, probably thousands of hours trying to figure all that out. And the important thing is I wouldn't expect someone that didn't have my background to go out and do this same thing that I did. I think really what I looked at was, I have a skill set as an engineer, and I can probably figure out how to make molds. And I don't think most of the people who can make chocolate will be able to do that. And so I just started doing research, and I was told, there's a thermoforming company down the road that told me you won't be able to do that. And I was like, challenge accepted. And so, I started working on that. But, I think it's about looking at, when you're talking about especially innovation, what skills do you have that you can apply in a unique way to make your product different in a better way? And so that's really what I've been trying to do all along. And it's shaping the chocolate. And I've got a couple other ideas in my sleeve that I'm working on right now. But, everybody, all the craft chocolate makers in the world, and this is I'm going to offend someone when I say this, so I'll apologize ahead of time, but all the craft chocolate makers in the world are doing similar things, right? They're saying, hey, I'm going to buy single origin beans, or I'm going to have 7 varieties, and we're going to make bonbons and then some bars and put them in pretty packaging and retail them, right? And that's great. You can build a big business from that. But that just, to me, wasn't super interesting. I didn't want to man a booth every Saturday for the next 3 years trying to sell my chocolate bars one at a time, right? I'm not in the stage of life where I can be able to do that with 3 young kids. And so, and I also didn't want to, build up and run a retail establishment, where we're just trying to make ends meet, paying rent and doing all this other stuff. And so I just was like, okay, I've got to find a more creative way to do this. And so what this allows me to do is I do custom orders when they come in, and it's anywhere from 50 to 500 bars at a time, or more. And so, I have a very specific order. I know how many I have to make. I have, chocolate on hand to make that, and then I run with it. So I'll stop there. But I have this interesting skill set that I've developed probably over the last 15 years that makes this stuff doable for me, but it wouldn't necessarily be doable for everyone else. But you just have to look at what your skills are and maybe how you can innovate in that space and do things a little bit differently, or do them the same. And whatever you want to do, it's that's what makes life fun. So. Oh, Clay, you're muted now.
Bragging about his techie side.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That if you are watching us live, you can go into the chat or comment section of whether it's YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. You can ask either John or Derek a question about what it is that they're doing, something that specifically is of interest to you. And we will get your question asked and answered during the course of the rest of the broadcast. Derek, so innovation is really interesting. So, I'm going to go and look at something and I'm going to think, well, the conventional wisdom says I can't do that. Challenge accepted, right? Or what I do is I'm coming at this from, 37 degrees off center and I see a different way to do things than other people do, right? But then you have to figure out how to turn that into a business, and we want it to be a sustainable business, right? Because if we're going to be able to achieve the long-term objectives of helping the community or helping farmers, whatever the mission statement says we want to be able to do, you need to create a sustainable business. And this is where innovation and for me, entrepreneurship come together, because you have to figure out a way to take your innovation to market. And I think that for people who are chocolate makers who are watching this live or who will be watching this afterwards, the notion of, there are other ways to grow a business than to be able to take my chocolate and put it into bars and sell it at the farmer's market, or take a chocolate and put it into bars and then make an e-commerce website. So, as you were thinking about the way you were organizing your business, was that decision, I'm not going to go to farmers markets, or what it is that I want to do is I want to have a project for which there is a big, community engagement, community impact. How did these things come together and inform the business model that you had for what Kontur chocolate is?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I knew that I wanted to do something to give back to the community, after spending a lot of time maybe being a little bit selfish, kind of building a software company, exiting that, doing really well, and just, being in the stage of life where I was like, hey, I really want to do some stuff to make the city that I live in, that I love, a better place, maybe the world a better place. And so that was kind of part of the underlying aspect of that. And that shaped a lot of things. Like, people said, don't make your own boxes, don't even make your own chocolate, get it from somewhere else, and don't pay for labor. Everything's got to turn into machines because it's more efficient. And I was like, yeah, I get it, from a financial standpoint, but I was also like, I think I can make that work anyway. It was just another challenge for me to say, let's see if we can make this work. So, that was an underlying, a big underlying part of it. But then when I look at the, innovation side, doing it differently, I kind of just looked at my life and I was like, what do I want to be doing the next 5 years? And if it's not, going to farmers markets and doing retail, then how can I do it a little bit different? And so just a lot of that thinking was in the genesis early on, just trying to figure out what do I want my life to look like for the next 5 years? Because if I start doing this chocolate stuff and this becomes my life, I've built a company, I've taught entrepreneurship. You think it's going to be like 1 or 2 years and then you'll have made it. And it's usually like 10 or 12. So I'm like, all right, I really got to think about this, kind of going back. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does for me. John, you are in the business of helping other businesses be better businesses at some respect, as a restaurant consultant. Yep. So how much of what it is that Derek says about his approach resonates with you and the way you approach, when you think of a restaurant, right? And you think about, I'm doing an Italian restaurant, or I'm in the South and so I'm going to do a designer, right? How would somebody says, I want to innovate, and they don't want to bring in Gordon Ramsay and, blow things up and that kind of stuff. So, when you think of how do you engage with your consulting clients around this notion of innovation and thinking, and, are there ways that people can really innovate on the entrepreneurship side of their business as well? I mean, in your world, because I think this is a really, really interesting concept as well.
So fortunately, or unfortunately, maybe, I've never had a restaurant client ask me to help them innovate. And I've never, even though I've got a fair amount of chef chops in awards and whatever, I've never considered myself an innovative or an innovator. So the majority of what I would do is more about helping a chef find his voice, right? Or helping a restaurant find their niche, helping a restaurateur, somebody that wants to open, helping them hone their message, right? Their culinary message, or their level of hospitality, to achieve a high level of hospitality. Because that's why we're going to go back to a restaurant that we like, is because, not because the food is great or not because of the pretty waitresses, but we're going to go back because of the way you make me feel when I'm in your restaurant. You make me feel important. Therefore, that's why I'm going to return. Now, the average customer may not understand that, but that's why. That's why.
Right. You might go to a restaurant for a particular reputation. You might go because you've heard you like the kind of food that they're making, right? But you're going to go back because of the experience which is associated with the delivery, right, of those expectations, whether they meet or exceed or fall short of your idea of what you're going on. So, Derek, in reading your website, I get the sense that, that thinking about the customer experience was also an important part of what it is that you were doing when you put your business plan together, if I can. I mean, so can you speak about, you make a particular point, I'm not sure exactly where it is on your website or if it's in John's article, about making it easy for your customer. Now, again, number one is they're going to come because you've provided them with a unique product, right? So it's a bar of chocolate, has their logo in it or something that they can use. It's a customer touch point for them. So it's the way they're going to be able to connect with their employees or their customers. So it's really important, that aspect of things. But if the process of working with you is too difficult, right, or cumbersome or not understandable, right, then will they come back a second time? And for me, this question of, it's easy to get somebody to buy something from you once, right? If they like it, they'll buy it from you a third time. But I think you actually have to get to that third purchase, right, which says, I've delivered a consistent experience that people are willing to reinvest over and over again in. I mean, and so, so can you speak about that in the context of what it is that you're looking to do, and how the individual components, where you say our custom chocolate molds are made locally, our craft chocolate is made locally, our boxes are printed and cut locally. What kind of, while other people would go, oh my gosh, that's just so much to do, you're going, no, it provides us the freedom to be able to offer, the foundation, perhaps, if not the freedom, to be able to offer a service in a particular type of way. And so, what parts of that do you think are the ones that you are happiest with, and where do you think more innovation needs to happen in order to make it work for you, not just your customers?
All right, that I think is a very multi-part question. So I'm gonna do my best. Keep me on track if I
unfortunately I'm known for them.
Yeah. All right. No worries. You gave me a lot to work with there. I think what John was saying earlier is very innovative, right? So when I was teaching entrepreneurship, one of the things I learned was that innovation is not necessarily inventing something new. It's just really taking something from somewhere else and applying it to an area that hasn't been applied before. And so, a lot of that, speaking around innovation, was just me taking things I'd learned in other places. And part of that was like customer experience. So I knew in the software world, so I was selling enterprise level software that ran, an entire business, and it wasn't an easy buy. So it took maybe a couple months to make the decision, a couple months to onboard. And so it was like, you want to take out as many of those roadblocks as you can to try to get those customers across the finish line. Because we knew once we did, they'd probably be with us for a long time and they'd be really profitable. So, you know, when I think about making it easy for the customer, that's kind of one of like 30 different things that I knew I had to make a unique product. It had to be compelling. It had to be really easy to buy. And so I started thinking of all those variables that I did before, you know, with a previous company, and started thinking, how do I line those up in chocolate the same way I did before to try to make something that is just a very compelling purchase that people will come back and buy again and again. So like a good example of that is, you know, how easy is it to get your own custom mold made, right? Well, if you want your own custom mold made now, it's like a couple weeks of back and forth, talking to your design team, the engineering team, getting test molds, like doing all this stuff. And I'm like, that is just way too much, right? These people, this real estate agent just wants cool looking chocolate. They want it on their door in a week. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, right? Because they love it anyway. It has their logo on it. It says whatever they want. And so how do I deliver that kind of experience? And so that was really what I was focused on, was making it easy. So one of the things I did, for example, is I found this great little tool online. It's like icons8.com, and it's like an AI upscaler. So you can feed in any image and it'll make it way bigger without losing like any of the definition. It's the best one I've found in case anyone wants to use it. So I took a company logo that's low resolution, taken off their website, that normally you couldn't use. I'd feed it into that tool and out would pop this high res logo I could use to trace and make the molds with. And I never had to involve the marketing team. I never had to ask them for a better file. If you've been in the design world, you know how that is. It's like, hey, can you send me a higher resolution file than the one you sent me, because this isn't going to do it for what I'm doing. So it's little things like that I try to line up to make it easy. I also don't ask people to design their own packaging. I like create a first draft for them. And then I say, what do you think about this? And 90% of the time they say, that looks great. Here's one or two quick changes. So project done. It's not like, hey, tell me what you think you want in your box. And then 3 weeks later they get back and they're like, well, we don't know. And so just anything I could do to take the minutia out of that process, from, you know, what chocolate might they want? How might they want the bar? You know, a lot of those things don't really matter as much as people would think they do. They just want something that tastes pretty good, has their logo on it, says what they want. And the faster I can deliver that, typically the better.
Understood. You know, John, you know, one of the things that occurs to me from what Derek says, and what I want to do is I want to put a question from Thomas, who's a long time. He was in, I think, almost every one of the clubhouse rooms that I did over the course of, you know, 29 weeks, 140 some odd episodes, and has been a regular visitor here. So I want to say thank Thomas for his support. Is that you talked about helping chefs find their voice in the kitchen. And so it's easy to say Italian, but that covers a multitude of sins, right? And so, you know, what my interpretation of Italian is really important. And so I think the question here for Derek and John, for you as well, is, you know, while irrespective of how it's packaged, the chocolate has to taste good, right? And I think that, you know, Thomas's question is, you know, how did you come to find? So I'm going to assume that it being single origin is probably not the most important thing. You know, it being 2-ingredient may or may not be the most important thing, that you're just trying to make a tasty and accessible chocolate. And so can you elaborate on a little bit about, and, you know, John, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with Derek about this. Both of you, both of you, I'd like you to weigh in on this for Thomas. So John, why don't you start off?
All right. I like Derek's chocolate a lot.
Yes. All right.
You know, I assumed, and I'll tell you, I assumed, so Derek and I have a common friend, and my friend Carl said, hey, do you know this guy, Derek? He's doing cool stuff with chocolate. And I was like, oh, okay, that's nice, you know? So I meant to go, my plan was to write about him in the context of like all the other chocolate makers I've written about. But Derek is doing something. So back to that customer service, that level of hospitality he's providing is quite wonderful, because he's able to do so much in such a small amount of time for the customer. And now, while we were there, Derek let me taste some chocolate that a couple people had sent him, some palets and some beans, and Derek's palate is much more refined than I expected.
I'll take that. I will.
Yeah. I mean, an engineer, the software company and all this stuff, and he's got the laser printers and the laser cutters, and his chocolate is quite good. It's very good. It's really good chocolate,
Nice. Well, and to expand, John, on what you were saying, and maybe to even answer the question, because Thomas has been sitting very patiently here. One of the things, after talking to a lot of people and thinking about the business of this, and having a lot of people taste test my chocolate early on, a lot of just like friends, relatives, random people that would taste test it. One thing I kind of realized is that most people in this country, if I'll make a blanket statement, don't really appreciate like high quality chocolate. Like they haven't had it. They haven't had a lot of craft chocolate. Their idea of high quality chocolate is like going to Whole Foods, paying $10 a bar for something that, is kind of still commodity chocolate in some regards. And so, when people ask me like, what beans are you using? How many varieties are you making? And all this stuff, I knew I wasn't ever going to be probably the best chocolate maker in the world. Cause I'm just not as interested in that as some other chocolate makers are. And like, the details behind that and that have 10,000 roasts under their belt and all that sort of stuff. So for me,
no bourbon barrels.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I was like, I need to make a chocolate that people like. It has to taste good. And if they like it, I'll keep it simple to start with. So Thomas asked, like beans, ingredients, flavors. So right now I basically buy my beans from either through a distributor, either Ecuador or Colombia. They're easy to eat beans. I have a good recipe that I make. I only make dark chocolate. I roast them the same way every time when I do my own roasting. And so it's just like simple, right? So I tell people you can have any kind of chocolate you want as long as it's 70% dark chocolate. That's what I make. That's all I make. I don't make 7 varieties of it. You don't have a lot of choices, but that really isn't what it's about when people buy this. It's about kind of the branding and the complete package. So I knew right off the bat with my equipment that I had and looking at what some other chocolate producers were doing that I didn't want a lot of variety of chocolate, because you can spend a lot of time crafting all these different varieties of chocolate with all these different tastes, and then you give them to people and they can't even tell the difference. And that to me was frustrating. And now the world needs those people, because we need people that can taste this good craft dark chocolate and say, this is amazing, I want more of this, and less people who are just munching down the Hershey's bar saying I need more of that, right? And so I really appreciate what those people were doing, but for me, I was like, that's just not me. I'm not as much of a foodie as those people, and I don't have the experience, and I'm probably not going to be the best at that. And so I'm just going to keep it really, really simple. I'm gonna do like 1, maybe 2 varieties of chocolate. I'm about to violate my own rule because I've got something unique. I think that has come out soon. I'm trying to keep it very simple so that it's easy to produce. But I also, you asked Thomas how much does 100 bars cost? My bars are not cheap, and I don't want them to be cheap because I want my margins to be there. And so I charge everybody full price, and I don't give any discounts unless you're a repeat customer. And if you like the product, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I do that for a reason. I do that because if I don't get repeat customers, then I know that I don't have a compelling enough product. Because if you're not willing to pay full price for it, then I'm not there yet. I've got to find something more compelling. And so that's kind of part of it.
I want to thank Heather very, very quickly for her note, which is thank you very much for joining us for as long as you did, Heather, and I hope to have you back in other broadcasts. Derek, you've made, I think, which is a really, really interesting couple of points for me, right? Which is I was involved in a pricing exercise very early on in my career in which a major company went through and said, how far can we go and discount our product? So what we can do is we can just capture market share and drive everybody out of business. And what we quickly got to as we were modeling this is they got a point where the more systems they sold, the more money they lost, right? Because of ancillary costs associated with customer support and things like that just became so huge that they couldn't make a living out of doing it. But when I heard you talk about, it's like your bars are expensive, what I really need to point out is that, I mean, other people, what they're doing is they're selling bars, right? So you walk into a competitive environment, the local gourmet food store, and there are 11 different brands, and I have to choose from among them. What you're doing, however, is you're providing a turnkey service, right? Yes, there is a chocolate component about it. And yes, there is a packaging component about it, but it's really what you're doing is you're offering a turnkey service component as well, right? Somebody can give this, and there are costs associated with doing all of those things, right? And so, while there is this is what the chocolate cost is a part of this. That's not how the price is derived, and that's not where the perception of value comes from, which is what I think is actually the key price driver here is how much of this for what's the value, right? Am I right in terms of how you think about this?
Yeah. So basically what John said earlier, which is that I'm selling an experience, right? And I think everybody should sell an experience because you can make a lot more money that way. There's a higher premium on that. So instead of saying I'm selling a chocolate bar for, $3, $5, $10, $20, I'm selling the complete package. And I think that just automatically increases the amount of value of whatever you're selling by a certain amount. Rather than just buying the chocolate bar, you're buying something with your own logo on it, or that you can give out as gifts to employees, or that has something more unique about it. So like for kids, for example, I create little chocolate bars in the shape of poo emojis. Like that you text on your phone, the poo emoji, the little poop. Yeah, right. So it's brown, right? So my kids are like, make a poo emoji. So, it's funny. It's like, well, this is going to make your day both, what do I say, more crappy and less crappy at the same time, right? It's a funny joke. But the kids love that. It's an experience. It's like they don't necessarily care about the chocolate or whatever else it is. That shape to them is entertaining. It's fun. It is more about an experience. And so you can charge more for that. So, but at the same time, there is a limit, right? So I'm even running up against companies that, I may charge them anywhere from $6 to $8 a bar fully packaged, and still make pretty good margins on that. But even then, I mean, $6 to $8 for a bar, especially if it's not that much chocolate, is not something people are used to paying, right? They're used to paying a dollar or two for a Hershey bar. You get a full size bar, and they're not used to high quality chocolate. So, it's a challenge finding that happy medium between how much of an experience can you make it, to drive your value up. But then, there's some artificial level that you have to understand that people are willing to pay for that. And that depends on the customer and the situation. So I'm constantly, trying to figure that out.
Right. And I suppose, so one of the things that you offer on your website is about this community impact, right? So what you're doing is you're creating jobs. How often, how important to the average customer is that aspect of your business, right? So, when you think about, I think about going to a company online that does advertising knickknacks. And so I can buy embroidered caps and I can do all this other kind. Oh, and, chocolate bars is one of the 11 things that they offer, right? But they're using, for the most part, junk chocolate. Right. And that they're using, large scale manufacturing techniques to do most of it. And, they might not even be doing all of it in-house. They're just doing this. But the idea here is, if people watch the video, all right, what they'll do is they'll say, yes, we have this little machine that has a roller on it, and we use that roller to cut the individual packaging out of pages. That's not necessarily something that you as the business owner want to do, but what you said is, what I can provide some part-time, maybe full-time, depending on the season and how busy things get, fairly low-skilled kinds of tasks, but one that require, if I'm going to do these things, I need pride of workmanship. There is, that aspect of things. So for your customers, how important is that aspect of what it is that you're doing? I mean, and how does it fit into the messaging and the sort of competitive advantage you think it gives you?
Well, I'll say what I think, and then I want to hear what John says about this too, from maybe the restaurant angle, because I think there's some angles there. But I think it's a big deal and not a big deal at the same time. So at the end of the day, people want to buy from companies that are making a difference or supporting, organizations, that type of thing. And that helps a lot with the local customers, especially if they know the organizations that are helping us or we're contributing to or whatever that is. But when you start to branch out a little bit and you're selling to companies farther away, that stuff becomes a little less of a deal. So it's kind of a balance between you still have to find ways to deliver stuff that's unique that not everyone else offers, even those commodity chocolates online. But then you really want to play both angles is the answer. So and both angles are true. I want to deliver you a great product that's differentiated from everyone else with the quality and the packaging and just everything that we do with the price or the time frame or whatever that is. But I'm also going to talk about how we're making a difference in people's lives or supporting other organizations, and we're still pretty early on, so we're trying to figure out exactly what that looks like long term. But I think the story is really important, especially when you're getting started, because that's when people they see what you're doing, they want to jump on the bandwagon. And that helps you kind of grow the early business until you get a little bit larger. And as you start to branch out, some of that matters less. But I would say both are really important. So John, what's your take from a restaurant angle? And there's a lot of ways that I think restaurants have talked about this, whether it's farm to table, supporting local farmers or other things, right? So like I would imagine you've got a perspective on this too.
So I'm going to back up for a second here. Speaking of poop-shaped chocolates, right? And kids, like, y'all, years ago, we rented a house on the beach for my extended family, and so there's a bunch of kids there, his cousins, whatever. And one day, for supper, I made a big pot of seafood chowder, right? And we're on the beach, and I bought all the fish. It was so fresh, and the shrimp, and there's scallops in there, and some oysters. And there's like 7 or 8 kids in the house, right? And the kids are like 8 to 12 in that range, right? And they came in from outside, and they go, "What do we have? And what did you make? What'd you make, Mr. Malik? What'd you make?" And I said, "Oh, I made this big pot of seafood chowder," right? It was wonderful. And half the kids turn up their nose, and at the time they're eating jelly beans, right? They're like, "Ooh, I'm not eating that." And they're watching me. I'm dipping into it, right? And they're like, "I'm not eating that. No, ooh." The jelly beans they're eating at the time were Harry Potter vomit flavored jelly beans. Do you remember those jelly beans, Clay?
Birdie Bots, every flavor. Yeah,
they were flavored with like vomit and dog food and all these grotesque flavors. So if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off, Derek, and say, "My hat is off to you for coming up with the poop flavored chocolate," because kids, they have no.
I need to clarify the chocolate didn't taste
poop shaped at least. Poop shaped at least, if not poop flavored.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I got you.
Right. I think that one of the things that stands out to me, and it's one of the bits of advice that I give to all of my consulting clients, is that number one is that small children, sort of have this ingrained idea that dark chocolate is icky and milk chocolate is good. Right. However, if you can get the kids to try dark chocolate in interesting forms, they're more than happy to do so, and then realize that, oh yeah, broccoli tastes good anyway. So, I'm happy to go about doing that. For example, I used to do roasted broccoli, but I made a Chinese inspired chocolate sauce. So we could have chocolate on our roasted broccoli, and my kids wanted broccoli so they could have more chocolate sauce on their broccoli. But I think the other important insight is that you have to make things for kids, right? So if you're in a chocolate business, and if you don't have something that a 6-year-old can go pull on a parent shirt sleeve and say, "Please, please, please buy me this," I think you're overlooking a huge kind of thing. And the other one is that, just deep breath, right? In, out, big sigh, and say, "It's just chocolate." right? And so the notion of it being funny at the same time, it appeals to kids, and adults can have fun with it as well. I mean, I think is for me is the takeaway that I would be there. I think that one of the challenges with a lot of craft chocolate is that there's no attempt at humor, right? There's no sort of self-deprecation or anything like that. And I look at what it is, that opportunity. This gives you a really, really fabulous kind of way to do it. And the other thing I'm looking at this, Derek, is that, right, you can use exactly the same process that you're doing for everybody else to create products which are advertise the service of your business. I've got something that, I can go to Moo right now and I can get roughly a 3x3 inch business card, and it'll cost me a lot less than $6 or $7 a piece. But I can also go to a company that'll do me that in, real wood veneer, or that'll make them out of metal or something like that. And, this becomes, a way for me to advertise my own business and give everybody everything to say no by boom, doing this, right? So another aspect of how do I create a sustainable business? How does I, as an entrepreneur, right, be internally and externally consistent with what it is that I'm doing, right? Which, I think is another thing for people to consider. We're coming into the last 10 minutes or so of the hour. I want to thank both of my guests, John Malik, who is a contributor to The Chocolate Life, a chef consultant down in North Carolina, Derek Peterson of Kontur Chocolate, who's got this really, really important take, I think, on the notion of innovation. Many people tend to think of innovation, and they tend to think about, innovation is another origin. I'm innovating because it's not just Peru, but it's this small cooperative in Peru that nobody else is going. And the innovation is in sourcing. And that's not always the case. That what we can do is we can look at the entire process of getting a chocolate made from the beans through every single step of the process, right? And think about, okay, how do we create a sustainable business from doing these other things? And I want to point out Christopher Schur, who's a colleague of mine up in Westchester County, where I used to live, says that shape has always played an important role in chocolate marketing. And that's absolutely the case. Most people are thinking about bars, rectangular. There is some play in the 3D nature of the mold, how thick it is, where the break lines are, what the shapes are as well. Ritter in Germany has got a trademark on square. So if you want to create a square bar in Germany, you can't, right? Because Ritter has got the trademark on square bars. Only on Germany.
What about Legos? Is anybody making chocolate Legos right now?
I believe that there are people who do. I mean, you have the challenge of, putting them together, right, in a way that maybe you can make one thing out of them, but I don't think. Right. But there are ways of being able to take that same concept, right, and then be able to change it slightly enough, right, so that you're not directly. Right. I don't know what the patent looks like anymore. Find out what it is that's covered. But in the last few minutes, I want to thank everybody who has been joining us to tell everybody that today. Christopher says there are some Legos that are sugar confections. It wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And they provide enough structural integrity so that you can play with them a couple times. But what I do want to mention, everybody, that today's broadcast has been sponsored by The Chocolate Life. Please go to TheChocolateLife.com. If you have an opportunity, please go, and we'll throw this up here. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and encourage other people to join in these streams, either on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I do want to say to everyone that after today's episode is over, that you will be able to go to YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you'll find the videos archived there. There is also on TheChocolateLife.com. Let's go and move over there. If we go to TheChocolateLife.com and we go to the homepage, what you can do is you can see that there is, in fact, a calendar. This calendar has all of the upcoming streams, right? So going forward, the ones in this color are Tuesdays, and the ones that are green, so buff is Tuesday and green is Fridays. But it also has an archive of all the past live streams organized by month. So I'm really, really excited to be able to have that. And if you're looking to, you can go there. You can find all the background information on all of the things that we're doing here on the Chocolate Life Live, including, if you're a member, commenting, and then being able to recommend in the comments ideas for future guests and for future topics. So I encourage everybody to go over and do that. So, Derek, you said you got some new things coming up. I'm a geek, and I have represented manufacturers of hardware. How much of your attention as an engineer is paid to the chocolate making process? And if you had to build one thing, right, to help you in the chocolate making process, what would that one thing be in the chocolate making process?
Oh, I think actually Aaron Andrews from Indie Chocolate in Seattle came up with this idea and told me I needed to build it. And that was before I was making a lot of chocolate, and I realized she's really right, which is just some sort of automated feeder that would feed the nibs into my stone grinders, because you got to add a lot of heat and you got to sit there and add them slowly. And when you're making 25, 50-pound batches of chocolate, it takes a really long time to feed them all in when you can be doing other things. And so I still may design something like that coming up. That's not necessarily what I'm working on, but I want one of the ideas to do so.
Do you think it would be a small vibratory feeder, or would you think you'd do a screw feeder?
Let me show you what I made. Let me see.
Ooh.
If I have it here. Oh, no, I don't. I broke it. It would basically be a pipe with an auger in the center that would just turn and slowly feed the nibs in. I thought maybe I'd have my mock-up prototype. I designed it, realized it would take more engineering work than I wanted to put into it, and put on hold for a while. But yeah, that was the idea. So
I'm going to share something right now. If you can do it for nibs, you can do it for sugar. And so the same device should be able to use for both of those things or any other ingredient. So you should also be able to do a version of it so that what I can do is I can feed the hopper of my cracker and winnower. Right. So I agree with you. That one of the things that the craft chocolate world, the small maker world, especially whatever it is you want to call it, needs is an inexpensive feeder, whether that's a little vibratory feeder or whether it's a screw feeder, an auger feeder, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't care, as long as it is multi-purposed and whatever its stand is, right, can be raised or lowered and things like that. The other thing that I would recommend, obviously you'd want food-safe plastic for the pipe. The other thing I would recommend is that one of the cheapest materials for hoppers is actually 3-gallon water bottles. Right. So all I have to do is get a water bottle at my local store and then cut the bottom off after I've drunk all the water. And then that becomes almost the perfect hopper for putting into a small feeder, rather than having to go and assemble something, using a brake and stainless steel and all this kind of stuff, which is going to be much more expensive. Just a thought when you're,
See, I bit the bullet and just went to Chocolate Alchemy, and I bought their big winnower. You could put the 50 pounds on the top and do it that way. So, well, anyway, I do want to say before I go that if anyone is interested in talking about, how we do our processes, how we make our boxes, any of that, I had a lot of people help me along the way, and I try to do that for others. So I've helped other people design, different boxes that can also be cut and folded the same way. I actually borrowed the idea, or stole maybe, from Dylan Butterbaugh at Manoa Chocolate in Hawaii. I stole it from his little YouTube video and kind of recreated it. I've talked to him now, and he's okay with that. But I got so much from other people and influence that I kind of want to do the same. And so, if I'm going to spend all my time inventing these processes, I might as well have it help the industry a little bit. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can hit me up on the website, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
Well, if I can, Derek, because what I like to do is I like to share the conversations. There is a comment stream on TheChocolateLife.com, and they can go to the post for today's live stream, and we could put those questions and answers into that post. So what I will do is I will set you up as a member if you're not already a member, so that what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to respond to those comments as well. So I'll take care of that this afternoon. John, do you have a final note that you'd like to make to take us out today? Something about chocolate innovation,
I
entrepreneurship.
I was gonna get my guitar since you asked for a final note, but but it's not in this room, fortunately. No, I don't. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting and understanding what Derek is doing. And I think it's not only is he doing cool work, but we're somewhat friends now. I'd like to thank him. We're already planning to go visit French Broad Chocolate together, so we can one, so I can write about them, and two, so we can probably pick apart everything that we get and with a fine tooth comb and maybe get a tour of their old factory as well.
I believe it is Pablo Picasso who's most widely quoted as saying, "Bad artists copy and great artists steal." Right, and I think that while there is a great deal of sharing in the craft chocolate world, I still think there's a lot of room for people to look at what other people do and be inspired and build upon them. And you can talk about stealing or whatever it is, but I mean, there are, only so many ways to do things in broad scope, but the devil is in the details. And before we head out, I would like to say thank you to Leslie for her comment. Love it, creative, inspiring. I'm glad that you found it to be so. For Mark at Blue Spruce Chocolates, who says, thanks for the offer, Derek. Mark and I have been talking about a bunch of things, and I know that some of the things that you've been talking about are really, really appropriate to where it is that the Blue Spruce wants to take their business. I also want to thank Christopher Booz. I mean, Christopher has been a longtime friend of mine. I know him from, days of, top 10 pastry chefs in America and top 10 chocolatiers from Pastry Art and Design and Chocolatier magazine and through the World Pastry Forum and things like that. So I've known him since the mid 2007, 2006, sometime around in there. And so it was great to be able to have him to participate in it, to say, yeah, no, absolutely. If you're going to be selling to the big boys, you need to make sure that all your product is food safe. So absolutely. When we say don't do this at home, if you're going to be careful, make sure that there is, for example, if you're using buckets to carry chocolate from one part, there are food grade colors, food safe colors, and non-food safe colors. Make sure you're using food safe colors in everything you're doing. It's going to be really, really important. And finally, what I do want to say is, yes, today is National Dark Chocolate. Is today National Dark Chocolate Day? Maybe it is. I didn't know that. But thank you, everybody, for joining us here on for this edition of the Chocolate Life Live, talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. Look forward to having people back in future Tuesdays and Fridays. And this coming Friday, we're going to be talking about co-packing and co-manufacturing, what to look for in a co-packing and co-manufacturing partner. And with that, thank you both very much. Thank everybody who's been watching either live or going to be watching us in the future.